I'm Amy. I'm so glad that you're joining us for worship today, and we welcome you. Several weeks ago, my family received a card from someone at church, and the card said, "Jesus' hospitality is when the unexpected is given to the unexpecting." The unexpected given to the unexpecting. And this really made me question myself. What was Jesus' hospitality? So I wanted to ask you, what aspect of Jesus' hospitality is the most unexpected to you? Is it his healing of the untouchables, his invitations to the excluded, his forgiveness, or his table flipping at the temple? For me, it is his surrender to absolute grace. Jesus' willingness to die not just for those who love him, but for those who hate him. For me, this is the most terrible yet best surprise. His surrender will become the ultimate plot twist of the resurrection, and somehow death gives birth to life. This is the hospitality of Jesus. May we look to him and be moved to lives of inconceivable grace and hospitality. Welcome to worship at Pelham Road.
Jesus Christ has triumphed now. Resurrection, he has conquered death somehow. Resurrection, now see the tomb laid bare. Resurrection, death could not hold him there. Resurrection, hallelujah, comes the resurrection. Hallelujah, comes the resurrection. God has raised him from the dead. Resurrection, risen our victorious head. Resurrection, death could not end his reign. Resurrection, God's will was then made plain. Resurrection, hallelujah, comes the resurrection. Hallelujah, comes the resurrection. Jesus Christ now lives again. Resurrection, offering new life to men. Resurrection.
We have two scriptures to read this morning, this Easter morning. The first is from Luke chapter 24, verse 46. This is what is written. The Christ will suffer and rise from the dead on the third day. And now from John's Gospel, chapter 20. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the tomb. So she ran and went to Simon Peter and the other disciples and the one whom Jesus loved and said to them, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." Then Peter and the other disciples set out and went towards the tomb. The two were running together, but the other disciple outran Peter, reached the tomb first. He bent down. He looked in and he saw that the linen wrapping was lying there, but he didn't go in. Then Simon Peter came, following him, and they went into the tomb together. He saw the linen wrappings lying there, and the cloth that had been on Jesus' head, not lying with the linen wrapping, but rolled up, placed by itself. Then the other disciple, who reached the tomb first, also went in, and he saw, and he believed. For as of yet, they did not understand the scripture, that he must rise from the dead. Then the disciples returned to their homes. But Mary, she stood weeping, still outside the tomb. And as she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb, and she saw two angels in white sitting where the body of Jesus had been lying, one at the head and the other at the feet. And they said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, "They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." When she had said this, she turned around and she saw Jesus standing there. But she didn't really recognize it as Jesus. And Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you looking for?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." And Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni." Jesus said to her, "Do not hold on to me, because I have not yet ascended to the Father. But go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord." Happy Easter.
Darkness, we were waiting without hope, without light, till from heaven you came running. There was mercy in your eyes to fulfill the law and prophets. To the Virgin came the word from the throne of endless glory to a cradle in a door. Praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings. To reveal the kingdom coming and to reconcile the lost, to redeem the whole creation. You did not despise the cross, and even in your suffering, you saw to the other side, knowing this was our salvation. Jesus, for our sake you died. In the morning, the that you rose, all of heaven held its breath, till the storm was moved for good, for the Lamb had conquered death. And the dead rose from their tombs, and the angels stood in awe, for the souls of all who come to the Father are restored. And the church of Christ was born, and the Spirit lit the flame. Now this gospel truth of old, it shall not kneel, it shall not faint. By His blood and in His name, in His freedom I am free. For the love of Jesus Christ, who has resurrected me. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings. Praise forever to the King of Kings.
Happy Easter to you. One of my favorite Sundays to preach. Well, there is a difference between a promise and a prediction. Let's begin with a prediction. A prediction is a forecast based on some present evidence. Doppler radar is a weather prediction. An economic forecast is based on various economic factors, indicators they call them. Predictions are reasonable. Now, they may or may not happen. Many factors are involved, but there are present reasons to believe that the forecast about the future will be accurate. Now, a promise, however, is not based on any sort of reason or reliable indicators. A father tells his son, listen, we'll play ball when I get home. Now, there's nothing in the present to say that that'll happen. A promise, some would argue, is just words. I kind of say it a little differently. I think of a promise as the words plus the character of the one making the promise. I mean, some fathers can say, now we're going to play ball when I get home from work, and that's a guarantee. Father gets in at 5, 6, 7, doesn't matter how tired he is, he's going to play ball. There are other men who could say, we're going to play ball when I get home from work, and they're not going to get home, and they know they're not going to get home until the child's asleep. So it's not just words. A promise is a commitment based on character. So the gospel writer writes, this is what is written. The Christ will suffer and rise from the dead on the third day. That's not a forecast. It's not a prediction with many variables. It's a promise. Its power is in the character of the one making the promise. What happened on resurrection morning was a good father keeping a good promise. Now, we live in an odd time in 2023. Promises are less reliable and forecasts are more reliable and accurate than ever. With the recent history of promises, most of us might even prefer a forecast to a promise. But forecasts do not always turn out as anticipated. I mean, he's regarded as the father of modern physics, known for his theory of relativity. He received the 1921 Nobel Prize in Physics. Einstein is a genius. Yet, he predicted, and his colleagues predicted, and they weren't accurate. I mean, he once predicted and said, there is not the slightest indication that nuclear energy will ever be obtainable. It would mean that the atom would have to be shattered at will. Geniuses make predictions that are wrong. Business Week has been a leader in guiding and predicting business trends for, 60 years now. But there are many predictions that they wish they could go back and have another shot at. In 1968, after analyzing their research, now bear in mind, they're doing research here. They're collecting a lot of data on imports and exports and people's buying habits. And so in 1968, this is what they write. It is highly unlikely that Japanese car makers will make any significant impact on the American car market. Well, that's a prediction. I mean, there's a wrong prediction and then there's wrong predictions. Toyota, Honda, Nissan, Acura, Lexus, Infiniti. Do I have to go on? In 1974, it was common political theory that no woman could become the chief political officer or public office holder of a Western European nation or the United States. Now, these predictions were based on voting trends and questions being asked in polling and so forth. And it was common knowledge, common belief, it was the prediction of 1974 that no woman could run a country, like, say, Britain. 5 years later, Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister of Great Britain. And you know, one of the pundits who predicted that there would be no woman who could ever become Prime Minister was Margaret Thatcher. Turns out she was a much better leader than she was pundit. But one final prediction comes from a minister named Pat Robertson. Just totally ignoring Matthew 24:36, he predicted in 1980 that judgment was coming to the world and that the world would end before the end of 1982. In 2023, we can see that his prediction was wrong. Predictions bring a lot of heat, but they never bring much light. Predictions are estimates of future occurrences based upon many different factors and methods and models. In other words, a prediction is nothing more than a good scientific guess. A guess based on data and research, but it's not certain. Promises, on the other hand, work differently. As I have already alluded to, the power of the promise is tied to the one making the promise. Now, there is no shortage of people that'll make a promise. There is no shortage of industries that make promises. Now, the easiest one to pick on is probably the diet industry, because they're always making promises about weight loss. I mean, the cabbage soup diet years ago was sort of this fad. It was a 7-day plan with a very limited menu, just cabbage soup, and you could have as much cabbage soup as you wanted, and it was meant to kickstart your diet, kickstart your weight loss program. They promised great results with this. The cabbage soup diet is a fad that caused the body to go into starvation mode, and it did provide quick weight loss, but that's not what they were promising. Dieters found it hard to stay with the cabbage soup diet. Imagine that. Because it wasn't offering enough calories to keep them satisfied, even if you could eat as much soup as you wanted. So it was a promise made, but not a promise kept. The diet industry claims are without limits and apparently without any regulation, because they make all sorts of outrageous promises. You know, the South Beach diet, the grapefruit diet, the liquid diet, all promise weight loss. At best, it's temporary weight loss. It's never true weight loss. But then you have companies like Neutrogena and La Prairie and Oil of Olay, and they promise to remove wrinkles. A facelift in a bottle is what one of them says. Yet reviews after reviews call these claims misleading at best. And what we learn is how gullible we are, and how advertisers can say whatever they please and take advantage of us. But all of these are nothing more than broken promises. From husbands to wives, from advertisers to church, we make promises and then we go and break them. We promise for better or worse, then chase after another person in a few years. We promise to tell the truth. We only tell the half-truth. We promise that we'll never deny you, Jesus, and then Peter goes out and denies him. Who could blame us if we preferred possibly accurate predictions over broken promises? The promise, once again, is only as good as the one making the promise. And apparently, those of us wrapped in flesh, it's a 50-50 proposition as to whether or not we can keep a promise. To evaluate a promise and the potential of the promise, we need to evaluate the maker of the promise. God once told Abram, he said, if you'll leave this place and leave your kin, I'll take you to a place. I will show you a place, and there your family will be blessed. Abram did as God instructed, and God kept his promise. Jesus once told a blind man, blind from birth, that he would go to the pool of Siloam and wash, that he would be able to see again. And he did. God kept his promise. The gospel writers put it this way: this is what is written, the Christ will suffer. That was a promise kept. And rise from the dead on the third day. Another promise kept. That's not a forecast. It's not a prediction with many variables. It's a promise. It is a promise kept. And as real as the suffering was, so was the rising. So when it comes to God, I'm going to go with God's promises. I'm not going to worry about predictions. I'm just going to rest on the promise. From Abraham to Jesus, from burning bushes to empty graves, God makes good on what God says. Advertisers can lead us astray, but God's promises are different. I want you to listen to St. Paul and how he puts it as he tries to lay out in front of his congregation the logic behind the power of the resurrection of Christ and how that is a promise of the resurrection for the rest of us. I want to remind you of the gospel I preached to you, which you received, on which you have taken your stand. By this gospel, you are saved, you're liberated, if you hold firmly to the word that I preached to you. Otherwise, you have believed in vain. For what I received, I passed on to you as of first importance, that Christ died for our sins according to the Scripture, that he was buried, and that he was raised on the third day according to the Scriptures, and that he appeared to Peter and then to the 12. But if it is preached that Christ has been raised from the dead, how can some of you say there is no resurrection of the dead? And if there is no resurrection of the dead, then not even Christ has been raised. And if Christ hasn't been raised, our preaching is useless, and so is your faith. For if the dead are not raised, then Christ has not been raised either. And if Christ has not been raised, your faith is futile, and you're still trapped in your sins. Then those who have fallen asleep in Christ are lost. If only for this life we have hope in Christ, we need to be pitied more than most. But Christ has indeed been raised from the dead, the first fruits of those who have fallen asleep. For since death came through a man, the resurrection of the dead comes also through one man. For as in Adam all died, so in Christ all will be made alive. Now someone will ask, how are the dead raised? What kind of body will they come? with. How foolish. What you sow does not come to life unless it dies. When you sow, you do not plant the body that will be, but just a seed, perhaps of wheat or of something else. So it will be with the resurrection of the dead. The body that is sown is perishable, but it will be raised imperishable. It is sown in dishonor, but it will be raised in glory. It is sown in weakness, but it'll be raised with power. It is sown a natural body, but it will be raised a spiritual body. I declare to you, brothers and sisters, that flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God, nor does perishable inherit the imperishable. Listen, I tell you a mystery. We will not all sleep, but we will be changed in a flash, in the twinkling of an eye, at that very last trumpet. For the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised imperishable, and we will be changed. For the perishable must clothe itself with the imperishable, and the mortal with the immortal. When the perishable has been clothed with the imperishable, and the mortal with immortality, then the saying that is written will come true. Death has been swallowed up in victory. Where, death, is your sting? Where, O death, is your sting? The sting of death is sin, and the power of the sin is law. But thanks be to God, He gives us victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. Easter is the annual reminder, in case we forgot it, that God keeps promises. God loves, and love keeps promises. For since death came through a man, the resurrection of the dead will come also through one man. For as Adam, all died, so in Christ, all will be made alive. There are promises yet to be completed. Easter, however, should calm our worries, because God has proved He can keep a promise. Winston Churchill had planned his funeral, which took place at St. Paul's Cathedral in London, and he used the Anglican liturgy to do this service. But at his direction, the ending of the service was a bit different. A bugler was positioned in the high dome of St. Paul's, and as soon as the benediction was offered, this bugler played taps. Of course, that's the universal sign that the day is over. But on the other side of that great dome, there was another bugler. And as soon as taps was completed, he was instructed to play Reveille. Reveille. It's time to get up. The universal sound that it's time to rise and get busy. God has promised that He will play the final note. God will keep the promise. At the end of history, the last note will not be taps. It will be Reveille. Happy Easter.
God sent His Son. They called Him Jesus. He came to love, heal, and forgive. He lived and died to buy my pardon. An empty grave is there to prove my Savior lives. Because He lives, I can face tomorrow. Because He lives, all fear is gone. Because I know He holds the future, and life is worth the living just because he lives. How sweet to hold a newborn baby and feel the pride and joy he gives, but greater still the calm assurance this child can face uncertain days because he lives, because he lives. I can face tomorrow because he lives. All fear is gone because I know he holds the future, and life is worth the living just because he lives. And then one day I'll cross the river, I'll fight life's final war with pain. And then as death gives way to victory, I'll see the lights of glory, and I'll know he lives. Because he lives, I can face tomorrow. Because he lives, all fear is gone. Because I know he holds the future, and life is worth the living just because he lives. Because I know he holds the future, and life is worth the living just because he lives.
And now, my dear brothers and sisters, as it was said in the beginning, let there be light. And more than that, let there be life. Let there be resurrection. Let there be hallelujah. Let there be dancing where there once was morning. Let there be daylight where there was for so long only dark. Let there be cool, clear water after a drought, nourishment after starvation, love after aching loneliness, resurrection after death, spring after winter, dawn after what seemed an eternal midnight. May we understand with our minds and absorb into our very bones this beautiful, transformative pattern, like a drumbeat, like a song we've known all our lives. Life, death, rebirth. May we believe in Christ's resurrection so deeply that we begin to see the possibility of resurrection everywhere we look. May our spiritual imaginations be renewed, and may we have the bravery to consider that things we have long pronounced dead for all time might yet come back to life, possibly even our very own hearts, barely keeping time in our very own chests. Let there be light. Hallelujah. Amen.